was young, I had a dream about a hard rain and a river. The river was wide and flat, and rolled its way across the country like a snake, sweeping up forests and mountains and homes. My small town was nothing to this river, no more than a pebble is to the weight of the ocean. All of us in town got out of the way, retreating to higher ground, a hill in the country, watching as the cold, heavy water began filling our streets and our living rooms, coursing up over our roofs and down our chimneys. For all its destruction, there was a peace about the water, so quiet and dark. Ignoring the cries of my friends, I stuck my toe in. It was too inviting, too tempting for someone as young and curious as I was. Though it seemed calm and flat as a mountain lake, beneath the water an unseen tumult sucked me under. Then I was pulled down the streets of my small city, to a place of black water like marble and soft silt. The light didn't reach there. My city was lost in a murky shadow, but I was pulled down under it. And a calming voice told me to breathe. Breathe. Just breathe.
Everything is all right.
Welcome to episode 6 of Not Now, Not Here. In this week's episode, there is a storm. A storm unlike any that we've seen around these parts. A storm that comes from the ancient clouds and stony winds that drift through our dreams. What will we find in the waters beneath the waters? And is there any hope to be found when the rains never cease? So turn down the lights, close your windows and doors, and sit back. Prepare to enter a world that is not now, not here. Floodwaters. There was a peal of thunder in the night. Marissa awoke to find her mother sitting at the foot of her bed, hands clenched in her lap, staring out the window. "It's just the storm, dearest. Go back to sleep." Her voice was like a whisper in a dream. But Marissa couldn't go back to sleep. Not with her mother sitting there like that. The storm had been going on for days. How many? Marissa couldn't remember, but she knew that her mother was kept up at night because of it. Sometimes she would check for leaks in their old roof. Sometimes she would pace back and forth on the front porch, watching the torrents of water flow through the streets, watching for Father. Sometimes she just sat, silent and still, her face void. She had never sat on Marissa's bed, though. "Is it gonna stop?" Marissa asked. "I don't know, dearest," Mother said. Marissa sneaked out from under the covers to sit next to her mother. "At school, Mr. Connor said storms happen when cold air and hot air meet and have a fight in the sky." Her mother smiled. "Sometimes," she said. "I don't think this storm is quite the same." "Why not?" Her mother sighed and put her arm around Marissa. Before Mother could speak, there was another crack. This time it came from downstairs, the unmistakable sound of the back door slamming shut. Marissa's eyes opened wide. She darted from her bed and ran as quickly as her little legs would take her down the stairs. "Daddy!" Running into the kitchen, Marissa stopped short when she saw her father standing just inside the back door. Every inch of him was drenched. He was wearing large green hip waders that were slick with mud. His breath was labored as he struggled out of his raincoat. "Get on back to bed, Marissa," he said. Mother pushed her way into the kitchen and went to her husband. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing," Father said. He looked purposefully at Marissa. "Get back to bed," Mother said. "But I want to hear." "You heard your mother," Father said. Marissa grumbled, turned on her heels, and stormed back up the stairs. She opened the door to her bedroom, shut it without going back in, and walked back to the top of the stairs to listen to what her mother and father were talking about. She often sat on the top step when she wanted to hear them talking. "We don't have the manpower," Father said. "We just don't. The few men we have left are tired, bone tired, and frightened." Marissa heard her mother banging away in the cabinets, making food for her husband. The sound was almost soothing. "Should we go?" Mother said. Her voice was soft and hard to hear. "We can't," Father said. "The water is over the Fairview Bridge. Highway 6 is washed out. Besides, they need me at the levee. If we can't keep it up, the whole town will go." "What about the fishing boat? We could get it out of the shed." "Not yet," Father said. "We can't take it out yet. If the neighbors see we have it," he sighed. "Not yet." The sounds of food preparation stopped for a moment. "Is it true, what they're saying?" "I don't know," Father spoke quickly. "They're saying there are people in the water, Dave." Mother's voice had picked up a notch. "Vivian said she could see faces and hands beneath the water." "I haven't seen any faces," Father said. "So it's not true?" Father didn't answer. "Well?" "There's something in the water. The other men are saying a lot of things, but I haven't seen any faces or hands. Just something. Something moving. It could be fish. It could be anything." "Dave," Mother said, "let's get the boat out. Let's get the boat out and go." "We can't." "If there's something in the water—" "We can't," Father said. "Not yet. Not until there's no other choice." "If there are people in the water—" "There aren't, okay? There's nothing in the water. It's just water. It's just rainwater. People are scared, and they're saying things, and that's all it is. Just a bunch of talk. A bunch of worry and talk about rainwater." Marissa heard her father's hand banging on the kitchen table. Then she heard his chair scrape against the tile. "Dave," her mother said. "Dave, you need to eat." "I've got to get back to the levee," he said. "I'll try to come back in the morning when we've got things under control." "Dave, please." "There's nothing in the water," Father said. The back door opened and then slammed shut. Marissa went back to her room, careful not to make any sound. At her window, she could make out the shape of her father in the backyard. His hood was up, his head was down, and he was walking quickly through the flooding lawn. Marissa opened her window a crack. The rain blew into her room with a gust of cold air. She should have said something. She had wanted to go back downstairs and tell her father before he left, but she couldn't, not when Mother and Daddy were angry. When they were angry, they'd just put her to bed without listening. She would have to wait until they calmed down to tell them. Maybe in the morning, at breakfast, when they had things under control and Daddy was back. She would tell them that there were things in the water. She could hear them talking when she listened to the rain. Their voices were smooth and thick. The voices slithered up to her window from the river like snakes made of sound. The voices were everywhere, unmistakable. She didn't know why her mother and father couldn't hear them, as loud as they were. Most of the time, she couldn't make out the words they said, but sometimes they all spoke together, and she could understand them.
Dearest,
They said,
don't be afraid. Dearest.
The clouds were so dense, no light fell through the windows, making day into night. The rain fell in persistent, thick drops, knocking at the windows of the house. Marissa was glad school had been canceled, but Mother wouldn't let her go outside. "Come help me check for leaks instead," she said, doing her best to smile. Marissa knew her mother was upset. Morning had come, but Daddy was still gone. After breakfast, Marissa was in the living room watching television. The signal they got on their antenna had been fuzzy for the last few days, but they still picked up the local stations. It was comforting to see other people, familiar faces from the news, even if the reception was so bad that Marissa couldn't understand what they were saying. Marissa heard a gasp from the kitchen where her mother was doing dishes, and she peeked her head around the corner. Mother was standing in the middle of the kitchen on her tiptoes. Water was sneaking its way across the linoleum, oozing slowly through the crack beneath the back door. Mother held a dirty dish in her hand and stood, frozen. The water was deceptively clear. "Mother?" Marissa said. Her mother turned. Her face was a living mask of fear. "Go to your room," she said. Marissa did. She ran to her room and sat on her bed. She closed the window she had left open. After a few minutes, her mother followed her into her room and sat next to her on the bed. Her shoes were wet. "Your father will be home soon," Mother said. "Does this mean the levee is gone?" Her mother didn't answer, but out the window, Marissa could plainly see the water carrying leaves and trash across the lawn. The water was flowing from the river, from the levee where her father was working. Marissa didn't know why, but she had thought the floodwater would come suddenly, in a mad rush. Like a tornado, it would sweep through the town and carry away houses and trees and people and pets. She had known it would come. The voices in the water had told her as much. But she didn't think it would come so slowly. The floodwater moved at a crawl, rolled its way into the house. The upstairs was quite small. Only Marissa's room, her mom and dad's room, and a small shared bathroom. The toilet had stopped working, though. The water wouldn't flush. "We need to pack. We should be ready to leave in the boat when your father comes back," Marissa's mother insisted. "Stay here in your room," she said, and hurried across the hall into the other room. Marissa could hear her walking around in there, pacing back and forth. Marissa made her way out of her room and sat at the top of the stairs, watching the water rise. It came in under the back door, through the kitchen, into the living room. It flowed up past the first step of the stairs, then past the second. Minutes ticked by. Marissa could hear her mother in her room, pacing back and forth, but Marissa kept her attention on the water. By the time it reached the third step, she could see things floating in it, things from the house, books and magazines from the living room, Tupperware from the kitchen, a small radio from the closet. Her father's radio. He said they were going to take the boat. Marissa didn't much care for the boat, but she knew it would make her mother happy. Was he coming home? There was another thing in the water, too. At first, Marissa thought it was a fish or maybe a lizard. She was excited. Marissa loved to watch fish, especially big ones. But as she watched, she saw that this was no fish. It couldn't be, could it? It didn't have regular fins. Instead, it seemed to have what looked like arms and legs. It was hard to tell what was beneath the rippling water. Also, something like a face spoke to her. She recognized the voice. It was the same voice she had heard through her open window.
He is stranded. Your father. He can't come. On the sand. The levee.
The voice trickled and churned. "He's okay," Marissa said.
Tired. Angry. Without hope. Levee is broken.
"Could he make it back here?"
Water is fast. Too fast. Far to swim.
The voice bubbled up from the water. Marissa wondered if her mother could hear it. But even if she did, it wasn't enough to draw her out of her room. The thing in the water looked up at her with an odd intelligence. "Can you help him?" Marissa said, standing up. "Can you bring Daddy here?"
No,
came the voice.
too high. On sand.
"You can't come out of the water?"
I am water.
Marissa nodded, though she didn't understand. Beneath the rippling surface, a pair of eyes gazed up at her. They were yellow, or seemed yellow through the hazy water. They didn't blink. They were piercing, endless. "Can I help him?" Marissa asked. "Can I take the boat to him?"
Your mother,
the voice said.
she worries.
"She's afraid, I think. She won't go to help him." Marissa knew her mother needed Daddy there to make choices like this. If Daddy didn't come back, Mother would likely stay in her room until the water came and washed her away. "But I'm brave," Marissa said. "I'm brave like Daddy. Mother wanted to leave, but Daddy wanted to help everybody build the levee."
Father is nice,
the voice said. "Yes, he is. I could take the boat to him. I could bring him back here."
No boat,
the voice said.
Water is fast. Too fast. Take boat away.
Marissa sat down again. If they didn't have a boat, then what help was there? "What can I do?" she asked. "There must be something I can do." There were many pairs of eyes in the water now, all of them gazing up the steps at Marissa. They weren't angry, but she could see why people thought they were. They were just so intent, unavoidable. Marissa wondered why she wasn't scared, because the eyes were scary looking. And the floodwater seemed scary too, but it wasn't either. Not really.
Hand in water.
Many voices said it. Marissa walked down a few steps to the water. It was halfway up the stairway now, and rising faster. It would be upstairs in an hour or two as fast as it was rising. If she were going to help her father, she would have to do it quickly. "You can take me?" she asked.
Take self,
the voices said. "I can't swim very well," Marissa said. She'd had lessons, but having seen the flow of water out her window, she knew it would simply sweep her away.
Change arms,
the voices said.
Change legs. We can.
"You can change me? Change me into what?"
Like us,
the voices said. There were dozens of eyes now, swimming through her living room. Marissa considered this for a moment.
Father is brave. You be brave.
Her mother wouldn't do it, and if Father was trapped on the levee, then there was nobody else. There was a clap of thunder. Marissa reached her hand into the water. Something pulled her forward gently, down the stairs and beneath the surface of the water. She gasped at how cold it was. She could see a form in front of her, gray and slick, moving through the water like an eel. But it was see-through, transparent, as if it were made of water, but water packed more tightly together. It held her hand and pulled her down the stairs, through the kitchen, out the back door. The pull of the current was strong and steady, but it didn't seem to bother the thing that pulled her. They passed through the yard and out into the street. There, they turned into the current, and Marissa noticed that they were descending. A growing darkness and a weight pressed on her from all sides. It wasn't possible. It couldn't have been. They were going down so deep, deeper than any valley around the town. How could the floodwaters have gotten so high? It was as if the earth had tilted, creating a slope down along which this strange form could glide, deeper and deeper into the floodwater. Marissa felt the need to breathe, but as deep as they were, she knew there was no way she would find air.
Be brave,
The voice said.
dearest. You be brave.
Marissa opened her mouth and took in a lungful of water. They were far down now, and moving at a speed Marissa wouldn't have thought possible underwater. It wasn't at all painful breathing the water. In fact, Marissa could see why breathing water was preferable to air. It was cooler and more refreshing, like air on a frozen winter day. It whooshed as it passed easily through her throat and out her gills. Why had she ever thought swimming was difficult? There was nothing hard about it. The slightest twitch of her arm would propel her forward like a jet, and her webbed fingers could steer her in any direction. The strange form released her hand, its big mouth smiling. It was almost completely dark where they were, but Marissa could see plainly enough, well enough to see that the form wasn't strange at all.
Same,
It said, smiling.
dearest.
Marissa did her best to smile. Her lips didn't move like that any longer, and realized that she had changed. She was one of them now, a part of the water. She cheered and kicked her legs in joy. We live down here, she understood, in the water beneath the water, deep down where the sun doesn't reach. We've lived here since before water covered the earth, and we rarely come up. Kicking as fast as she could, it wasn't long until she rose to the bright water, the water up above, the water where the fish and sunlight were. She kicked hard through town, making her way to the broken levee. Through the lens of the surface, she could see her father sitting on top of a pile of sandbags with several other men. They were huddled against the rain, drenched, and watching as the water rose to claim them. The others warned Marissa not to approach the men.
Men,
The others said,
afraid, dangerous. Brave,
Marissa told them.
my brave father.
The others didn't understand, and neither did Marissa, not entirely, not anymore. Did she have a father? Could water have a father? Her memories were slipping from her, dissipating like a handful of sand tossed into the ocean, particles that drifted through her. Again, she felt refreshed. It was wonderful to be rid of such weight, more free to flow as her real self. Still, the memories clung to her, and Marissa knew she had to try to save him. She could feel his fear, his helplessness. She couldn't reach the surface, but she got as close as she could.
Father,
she cried.
Brave father.
He looked down. He screamed. All the men screamed. There were 5 of them left on the levee. The other men had said they would be back with boats, back with life preservers. But no one had come back. The water might have been too fast, or they might not have made it, or they got 'em, the men said, their eyes looking down at the shapes in the water, at the eyes. Nobody's coming, said another. They might yet, Marissa's father said. Of course, this was before one of the things came up and roared at them. They all saw it. All of them heard it. The deep, guttural bellow from the creature below the surface. They couldn't lie to themselves. There was something there. Something angry. Something that wanted to take them. All they could do was huddle together and wait. But the water kept rising and rising. When the water reached their feet, a few of the men prayed. When the water reached their knees, the praying was over. Each of the 5 men who had stayed behind to try to repair the levee was carried away, hopeless, in the current. Brings us to the end of this week's episode. We hope you found it as curious to hear as we found it to make. Be sure to tune in next week for another stormy installment. This week's episode features music by Kevin MacLeod. The songs Decline, Lost Frontier, and On the Shore are used under the Creative Commons license and can be found at incompetech.com. If you have a project and you need scoring, or if you just want to hear some cool music, I recommend that you check out Kevin's site. You can also visit notnownothere.com for more information about the music, including legal information and links to all the songs you just heard. Other music was provided by jewelbeat.com, which is a great source for background music and scores. They've got a huge selection and are also wonderful if you need music for any projects you are working on. The stormy atmosphere you heard on today's episode was created using ambientmixer.com. That's ambient-mixer.com. For a list of all the sounds used and information about the Creative Commons license, please visit notnownothere.com. This podcast is written and performed by Phillip Kohtz. If you like any of the stories you hear on the show, you can read them or download them for free online. You can find all of the stories published in a variety of digital formats, corresponding artwork, poetry, our blog, and also news about future releases at notnownothere.com. You can also find us on Twitter and probably other places. We don't know, we're new at this. Also, if you like what we're doing, please spread the word and be sure to stop by our site and give us your feedback. We'd love to hear your thoughts, opinions, criticisms, and ideas. Until next week, kind listeners, it's time to return to the now and the here. May the winds be ever at your back.